plays over 1,500 tracks every week, most of which I choose myself.
We played Macy Gray when no one else had heard of her, and now she builds a stadium this big.
43 disc jockeys bringing us a pageant of music. Everything from boogie woogie, ska, and other knees-up stuff.
Radio 2, the most listened to radio station in the UK.
Posh! Posh! It's starting again! Oh, it's making me come over all faint.
Oh, it's probably your thong riding up. Why don't you hitch it down a little bit?
No, they think it's all over. It's starting again. They've moved it to 9:30 on Friday night. It's following us.
Oh, babe, why don't you read Brooklyn a nice bedtime story, and I'll try and work out how to turn the telly off.
All right.
Hello?
Once upon a time.
Oh, give it to me.
The new series of They Think It's All Over starts Friday at 9:30 on BBC One.
He's had one foot in the grave for 10 years, until tonight. So before the final episode, BBC One asks just what is it that we love about Victor Meldrew?
What?
Good morning. 5.
I think most of us have got a bit of Victor Meldrew in us.
I don't believe.
It's one of those strange facts of life you can never work out. It's one of the great sitcoms, One Foot in the Grave, without a doubt. I'll just lie down the floor now and die, shall I?
Although it's called One Foot in the Grave, it's the other foot the series is about.
Morning, Mr. Meldrew.
The frightening thing for all of us is that this is going to be the most important thing we ever do.
Can you believe?
It's a combination of a marvellous script with exactly the right cast.
Will you stop?
It's the last ever episode of One Foot in the Grave here on BBC One Next. And there are classic episodes on BBC Video and audio cassette.
Thing is, before she, sex for me had been a function. But this first night, I mean, it was a revelation.
It was Wednesday.
It was wonderful, you know, and it was more, I was saying it was more than the physical.
Well, for you, it was spiritual, wasn't it?
Yeah. You know, I was still experimenting with the dosage, so...
When I first saw G naked,
yeah.
I always compared it to a road accident, you know, it's like a little bit shocking, but you can't help looking.
Yeah.
There she was, the loveliest thing I'd ever seen in my life. And I made up my mind there and then that I had to have her.
It's about lust.
You're a very lovely girl.
Get off me, you ape!
It's about desire.
Why is it that girls who look like Bridget Bardot on a good day...
No. I said no!
They always turn out to be virgins of unassailable purity.
But is it about love?
Are you sure you want to go through with the rest of the evening?
Absolutely.
Kingsley Amos's Wickedly Wicked Take a Girl Like You starts Sunday at 9:05 on BBC One.
He loves this song.
See? You are a good mother.
The Royal Family, next Monday at 9 on BBC One.
Now on BBC One, it's the end of the line for Britain's favourite complainer. You can get Richard Wilson's thoughts about the end of One Foot in the Grave. He's online now at bbc.co.uk/live chat.
Vote for your all-time favourite episode of One Foot in the Grave.
You've got to go a long way to beat 4.5 hours staring up a horse's bottom.
Call 09001 447701 for The Beast in the Cage.
What on earth happened?
It wasn't my fault.
09001 447702 for The Pit and the Pendulum.
Well, I'll tell you exactly what the problem is, Mr. Sturgeon. He's only planted it in the...
09001 447703 for The Trial.
Do you mind if I ask what you're doing here?
09001 447704 for Warm Champagne.
I have just put super glue on that glass.
09001 447705 for Love and Death.
4291.
It's your choice. Lines close at midnight on Sunday and calls cost a maximum of 10p. Then watch One Foot in the Grave, the viewers' vote, next Monday 9:30 on BBC One.
Posh! Posh! It's starting again. Oh, it's making me come over all faint.
Oh, it's probably a thong riding up. Why don't you hitch it down a little bit?
No, they think it's all over. It's starting again. They've moved it to 9:30 on Friday night. It's following us.
Oh, babe, why don't you read Brooklyn a nice bedtime story, and I'll try and work out how to turn the telly off.
All right.
Hello?
Once upon a time.
Oh, give it to me. The new series of They Think It's All Over starts Friday at 9:30 on BBC One.
It's time to go home because I'm fed up of this kind of dog persecution.
For the latest island news, Castaway Diaries starts Friday at 8:30 on BBC One.
This is BBC One in the South East. Now the news at 10 o'clock with George Alagaya and Gwennon Edwards.
The fate of the U.S. presidency hangs on the verdict of 7 judges. The Florida Supreme Court will decide whether a recount of votes is legal. Britain pledges its troops to Europe's Rapid Reaction Force. And a deal on the Dome. It's set to become a high-tech business park.
Here in the southeast, the party's over. London's New Year fireworks fizzle out before they've even been lit. And hundreds of jobs under threat as the city's oldest bank faces closure.
Good evening. 7 men and women judges in the Florida Supreme Court tonight hold the balance between the 2 men who seek the presidency of the United States of America. Just half an hour ago, the judges finished hearing the arguments on whether the hand counting of votes in the crucial state of Florida is legal. If they rule in favor, the Democrat Al Gore is likely to pick up extra votes. As things stand, the Republican George W. Bush has just enough votes to take him to the White House. Our special correspondent Gavin Hewitt is at Florida's Supreme Court.
73, 74, 75.
2 weeks after America voted, the people were allowed into Florida's Supreme Court to catch a glimpse of history and to attend a hearing that might just finally resolve who won the race for the presidency. Arriving at the court, senior advisors for both candidates, James Baker with the Bush campaign. Also walking up the courthouse steps, lawyers acting on behalf of Vice President Al Gore. The main issue to be settled, whether recounts by hand should be included in Florida's final election results. Al Gore currently has fewer votes than George W. Bush and needs the recounts to have any chance of winning.
Hear ye! Hear ye! Hear ye!
The court gave each side an hour to make their arguments. The Chief Justice underlined the importance of the occasion.
The court is certainly aware of the historic nature of this session.
Lawyers on Al Gore's side of the argument said the issue was one of fairness. It was important to re-examine ballots that machines had failed to count.
It's flatly wrong. It elevates the machines over voters. We have a situation in Palm Beach County where the election officials reported that 10,000 people, 10,000 ballots, did not record a vote for president. Now that should raise an issue.
But the court questioned whether it would be right to allow just 3 counties to have a recount by hand. Al Gore's lawyers conceded they would be willing to see a recount by hand across the whole state.
If you concluded that it was essential to avoid unfairness or some kind of overweighting of one county's vote over another county's vote, this court has within it its equitable power to have a statewide recount.
But George Bush's legal team said it was impossible to examine ballots by hand and read the voter's mind, and it was too late to reinterpret the laws under which elections had been conducted.
I would urge that the court not, after the election has been held, change the rules by which the election should be conducted.
The hearing has just ended, and the 7 judges must now give their ruling. Should they order the recounts to stop on the grounds that they don't adhere to Florida law? That would almost certainly give George Bush the presidency. Or do they allow them to continue, giving Al Gore the chance to overtake his rival. Gavin Hewitt, BBC News, Tallahassee.
And let's join Gavin Hewitt now, who's at the court in Tallahassee. Gavin, I know either man could take this on and on to the Supreme Court in Washington if necessary, but surely there must come a time before that when one of them has to sort of bow out gracefully.
Well, I've noticed that in recent days several senior politicians have been saying that this court hearing in Tallahassee today, this Supreme Court hearing, should be the end of legal battles. Now, this could be very tough on Al Gore, because if the court decides the recounts can't go ahead, George W. Bush would effectively be the winner, and then Al Gore would face the toughest decision of his life. Should he concede or risk taking this to a higher court and alienating the American public?
Gavin, I know I don't want you to try to second-guess the verdict, but what's your overall impression of today's proceedings?
Well, the judges were very interventionist. They interrupted, particularly George Bush's lawyers. They were robust. They were skeptical. I noticed twice that the Chief Justice said we should be concerned about the voters' interests, and this would suggest they are concerned about those who are claiming that their interests haven't been taken into account. They also said that there was no immediate deadline beyond December the 12th. And just one further thing, the court has just announced that there will be no decision on this today.
Gavin, thank you very much. 12,500 troops, 72 combat aircraft and 18 Royal Navy warships. That's Britain's commitment to a new European Union Rapid Reaction Force. Britain is one of the biggest contributors to the force, which will be operational by 2003. The Conservatives claim the force is a step towards a European superstate.
This was the moment British troops crossed into Kosovo last year. The operation was supported by many countries, but one of them, America, made the whole thing possible. And now Europe wants to put that right. So today, the European Union summoned its top brass. What began as the common market many years ago is starting on a new military path.
The reality is that the Americans, over very many years, have understandably criticized Europe for not being able to make a sufficient contribution. This is Europe's response, and for the first time Europe will be able to make an effective contribution.
The French have been pushing hardest for this new European force. In this exercise, the French military show how they can guard their own people anywhere in the world. The French ambition is to be leaders of a European Union with global power, an economic giant with military muscle.
We try to influence world affairs through Europe. So it's natural that, at least for its own political goals, its own political aims, Europe should have its own military capacity.
So what will this force actually do when it starts in 3 years' time? Well, there could be rescue missions, as in Sierra Leone recently, humanitarian relief, helping out in disasters like floods, and peacekeeping, intervening in places such as Bosnia, which leaves many wondering where this will all lead. What hasn't been agreed here today is exactly how this new force will tie in with Europe's traditional military alliance, NATO. The fear among some is that the EU at this building will start to rival NATO based a few miles up the road. Ministers say they won't allow that to happen, but the risk is that as the EU is armed, NATO will be undermined. This French headquarters is designed to operate separately from NATO, which is exactly the kind of thing fueling the current controversy in Britain. The Conservatives say today's step is dangerous.
These plans are a political organization, an EU-based Euro army that will actually lead to the dilution and breakup of NATO, and will actually create no extra capability in Europe, but lead to the aggrandizement, the superpower concepts that seem to be running around in some of the EU minds, including the Prime Ministers.
The American military are watching nervously. They want Europe to pay more for defense, but not to go its own way.
NATO's dominance in European security affairs will be undermined. Europe will have its own means of action, and NATO cannot dictate whether or not European responses will be made.
The French have been showing how potent the new European force will be, while Britain says it won't get dragged into operations it doesn't agree with. Today's decisions are momentous and may change the whole character of the European Union. David Shrookman, BBC News in Brussels.
And John Pina, our political correspondent, is at Westminster. John, I know this sounds like an obvious question, but what does Britain get out of this?
Well, we've been hearing a lot from ministers recently, George, about the need to engage constructively in Europe, and this is precisely the kind of thing they mean. In or out of the European single currency, it's an opportunity for the government to show its pro-Europeanism. But it's also an opportunity, as we've seen in that report, for the Conservatives to accuse Labour of leading Britain by stealth into a European superstate. Now, the Prime Minister and other ministers say there's no question of that. The British forces wouldn't be committed without government say-so, and they're accountable to the UK Parliament. But for many people, the armed forces and what appears on military insignia and flags are a characteristic of nationhood, and we can expect this argument to be batted back and forwards between the parties at election time.
But, John, it isn't just the Eurosceptics who are against this whole thing, are they?
No, and it's not just the Conservatives accusing or suggesting that this Euroforce could undermine the link with America within NATO. Just today, we've seen Lord Healey, the former Labour Defence Secretary, joining with others in putting precisely that argument. Now, tonight, the Prime Minister's been dismissing that out of hand. On his way to Moscow to meet the Russian president, he described it all as a scaremongering nonsense. On another front, there'll be those in East European countries waiting to join the EU who'll fear being left out in the cold. So you can see that this is really just the beginning and not the end of a long and complex argument.
John, thank you very much. It looks as if the Millennium Dome is to become a high-technology business park. The Legacy Consortium says its plans will create several thousand jobs when the dome closes at the end of the year. But although Legacy is the government's preferred bidder, contracts have yet to be signed.
After soaking up £628 million of lottery money, the Dome's at last found a buyer. But its days as a visitor attraction are numbered. The zones will be demolished, and the chief executive, P.Y. Gerbeau, has failed in his efforts to buy it and run it himself.
Well, my friend P.Y. Gerbeau is a great enthusiast, and I think he will be very disappointed, because I think he really believed in and had a passionate belief in it. But nonetheless, he has to recognize, I'm sure, that this was a very late entry into what has been a very long process of negotiation.
Legacy first expressed interest in the Dome a year ago. Its website shows what the inside of what it's calling Knowledge City will look like in future. One model is Cambridge Science Park, which brings together academics, high-tech industries and possible financial backers on a single site.
By the end of the transformation of the space, some 14,000 people will be employed within the Dome. So this is real regeneration of the Thames Gateway area.
The Legacy deal's worth £50 million cash down and a possible $250 million if tenants come forward as fast as the company hopes. But the government was told that demolishing the Dome and selling off the land would make more money.
Whatever happens as a result of today's announcement, the Dome will be idle and empty for a long part of next year, and it's unlikely to represent good value for taxpayers' money either.
We are content that we've got best value for the taxpayer and for the public, that we've got the best deal that is possible at this stage, but of course there's a lot of work to do to make sure that that deal is secured and before the contract is signed.
Legacy's been granted the status of a preferred bidder and has until February to conclude the deal. The last preferred bidder, Nomura, walked away before completion. The government will be hoping that doesn't happen this time and that they can finally draw a line under what's become a financial and political disaster. Nick Hyam, BBC News, Westminster.
Israel has carried out a major bombardment of Palestinian targets in the Gaza Strip. More than 30 Palestinians are reported to have been injured. Israel said it was retaliating for a bomb attack on a school bus travelling from a Jewish settlement in Gaza, which killed 2 Jewish settlers. Our Middle East correspondent, Hilary Anderson, reports.
With almost every minute came another shell. Israeli helicopters and warships unleashed their might. The center of Gaza was in a panic. The missiles hit Palestinian Authority security buildings. An Israeli bus was bombed this morning, and Israel blamed Yasser Arafat.
The PA is directly responsible for the operation, for the execution of the last event, and we find no way but to respond the same way that any other free world democracy would in our case.
Scores of Palestinians were taken to hospital. Some civilian homes were hit too. The Israelis say it's not over yet. The Palestinians have vowed revenge. Tonight's attacks by the Israelis were the most extensive in several weeks, and they've brought to a crashing end what had been a brief lull in the fighting. Diplomatic efforts to solve the crisis simply aren't working, and both sides are accusing the other now of treating this like a war. When this Israeli school bus was bombed this morning in the center of Gaza, that's what it felt like for Israelis. The shrapnel sliced through. Many were injured, including children, some severely, and 2 died. One, Miriam Amitai, a mother of 4, was laid to rest today. A teacher killed on her way to school. Islamic extremist groups claimed responsibility for the bus attack. Yasser Arafat denied involvement. But for this pain, here in Israel today, all the Palestinians of Gaza are being made to pay. Hilary Anderson, BBC News, Jerusalem.
Child offenders as young as 10 may soon be forced to wear electronic tags. Electronic tagging has so far only been used to monitor offenders over the age of 16. The Home Office now plans to give magistrates in England and Wales the option of imposing tagging orders instead of custodial sentences or community supervision. Prince Charles has opened the Millennium Seed Bank in West Sussex. It's designed to save thousands of plant species threatened with extinction. More than 300 million seeds, including all of Britain's wild plants, will eventually be stored in what the Prince called the Bank of England of the botanical world. The world's first rotating bridge has been lifted into place on the River Tyne. Pedestrians and cyclists will be able to use the Gateshead Millennium Bridge when it opens next year. The bridge rotates upwards to let boats sail underneath. The British Medical Association says government plans to improve the NHS in England are threatened by a shortage of doctors. The BMA claims that targets to cut patient waiting times by 2004 won't be met unless thousands more GPs are recruited. But the government insists it can keep its promises.
Waiting and the NHS often go together, and to deliver a better service, we need more family doctors. That much just about everyone agrees. But as this inner-city practice in Birmingham shows, the health service is already struggling to replace those GPs it has already got.
I'm going to give you some tablets.
Dr. Venugopal retired 3 years ago. He's had to come back because they couldn't find anyone to replace him. There are thousands of other Asian GPs about to retire serving similar communities. And that's bound to have an impact on the government's national plan.
I think NHS plan is a utopia for someone to sit down in their nice plush offices to think that we can achieve it. But it cannot be done. What you need is manpower. Manpower, where is the manpower?
Under the plan, the government has promised that by 2004, every patient in England will be seen by their doctor within 48 hours. Today, the British Medical Association said that was unrealistic without a lot more GPs.
I hope we get more than the 2,000 minimum that Mr. Milburn said. If we don't, then there's going to be great difficulty in reaching the sort of targets like access to GPs in 48 hours right across the country.
The government, though, points to practices like this, which already manage to see all their patients within a couple of days. And there are certainly doctors who believe better organisation can deliver better results.
I think there's tremendous grounds for enthusiasm and confidence that we will meet those targets. It's not just about GP numbers. It's about getting everybody in the health service to work together and more effectively.
Ministers say the telephone advice service NHS Direct will also help reduce demand on GPs. But they know recruitment remains the real challenge ahead.
One of the great obstacles facing the NHS will be finding the skilled doctors and nurses who are needed to make it all happen. There is still a real question mark over whether they will be able to achieve that. Neil Dixon, BBC News, at the Department of Health.
Train companies have issued emergency timetables. They include the changes caused by speed restrictions following the Hatfield crash. But rail companies have warned there could still be long delays and the timetables could differ from week to week.
The end of another long journey on the crippled East Coast Main Line. These passengers arriving at London's King's Cross have been held up by speed limits and flood damage. The general view, there's not a lot you can do about it.
I expected to get here for about 1 o'clock.
What time is it now?
It's what, 5 to 4 now, so it's been a bit long.
It seemed to be a very long wait to get on a train to London. It was over an hour from Retford, and the trains were extremely crowded.
We left at 10, and it's now 4 o'clock.
But their normal timetables have been abandoned and replaced with emergency plans that train companies say they can keep to. Even they may need to be rewritten each week. The big worry is Christmas. The timetables for the festive season won't be published for another fortnight. More uncertainty.
So basically, if people want to start booking now for Christmas, they can. What we will try and do is make sure that there are services of some sort in place to make sure they get to their destinations, and otherwise, if worst comes to the worst, then obviously they will be eligible to get a refund if necessary.
There are warnings tonight that popular cheap fares for passengers booking in advance are at risk.
As we run up to Christmas, we understand that a number of the cheaper tickets are being withdrawn, and the reason the train companies are doing this is to manage demand, to avoid overcrowding. But again, it's the passenger that ends up suffering.
Passengers are still waiting for details of a compensation scheme promised by the rail industry. But what they want most of all is better information. The new timetables may be fragile, but they do at least provide some idea of when trains are going to get to their destinations. Tom Simons, BBC News, King's Cross Station.
The world's biggest polluter, the United States, has said it is prepared to make concessions to reduce emissions of damaging greenhouse gases. Earlier, France's President Chirac told the climate change conference in Holland that America had to cast aside its doubts before the world reached the point of no return.
These are tough times, 4 days left and still no deal. Few will openly make concessions, but it became clear tonight that is beginning to happen behind the scenes. As ministers and world leaders arrived to take control of the talks, the French president attacked America for prevaricating.
Chaque Américain émet 3 fois plus de gaz à effet.
One American creates 3 times as many greenhouse gases as a Frenchman, he said. US consumers and their cars and industry produce 1/4 of the world's greenhouse gases. America argues instead of ending up in the atmosphere causing global warming, the most important gas, carbon dioxide, can be absorbed by forests and farmland. They wanted this idea to be a major plank of any deal, but their chief negotiator now says they'll compromise extensively.
We want only real measures. So whenever we find real measures that can reduce carbon concentrations by absorption, we ought to use them.
Europe says they shouldn't produce the gases in the first place. Britain's Environment Minister demonstrated a simple alternative to the car, but also announced a £69 million package for cleaner vehicles. The arrival of a powerful group of politicians has, it seems, brought this major concession from America. It won't be enough to secure a final deal, but things are beginning to move. Margaret Gilmore, BBC News, The Hague.
Campaigning is underway in 3 parliamentary constituencies in England and Scotland. Thursday sees by-elections in West Bromwich West and Preston. But in Scotland there are 2 battles in the late Donald Dewar's old seat of Glasgow Annisland. There's one election for the Westminster seat and another for the Scottish Parliament.
Welcome to Glasgow Annisland and new politics. Single constituency, double by-election. But there's a charmingly old-fashioned feel to this Scottish contest, largely across the SNP Labour fault line. Henry McLeish succeeded the late Donald Dewar as Scotland's First Minister.
Working hard to take on the record of a very good man, you know.
Labour starts well ahead, but knows the voters need reassurance.
Well, this is a campaign about honest policy making. I think that people are interested in policies, education, health, housing and pensions. But at the end of the day, this is not about being too technical, being too slick, too fancy. This is Labour linking with the people.
This constituency spreads from the affluence of Glasgow's West End Cappuccino zone through solid housing to the despair that is the huge Drumchapel estate. Naturally, Labour's opponents focus on the downside. The Nationalists say Labour in power has been a letdown.
Labour are responsible for the condition of people within Annisland and the condition of public services, and they're losing the trust of the electorate because the things they promised, like lower waiting lists, are actually increasing.
There are more than 16,000 pensioners in Annisland. Labour's opponents recall the 75 pence pension increase. Labour stresses next April's £5 minimum rise, plus other benefits. The Tories aren't alone in wooing the pensioners, but they believe they can prosper as the alternative Scottish opposition.
The Labour Party's on its way out. Whether it's this week, next year, there's going to be a need for change. Scotland's not a one-party state, and people do not want nationalism, which would break up the whole of the United Kingdom.
In this political dance, the Liberal Democrats have to tread carefully. They are in opposition at Westminster, but share power with Labour in the Scottish Parliament.
The voters are actually quite sophisticated about recognising the two different levels of Parliament, if you like, handle different things, and we can handle them in different ways depending on our position.
Labour should win here, although the party has struggled in recent Scottish by-elections. The key factor could be turnout. In simple terms, who's more inclined to vote? Labour's core support or the disaffected? Brian Taylor, BBC News, Glasgow Annisland.
A total of 6 candidates are taking part in the by-election for the Westminster seat for Glasgow Annisland. Donald Dewar held the seat in the 1997 general election for Labour with a majority of more than 15,000 votes. And 7 candidates are standing in the by-election for the constituency's Scottish Parliament seat. Football, and in tonight's Premiership match between Coventry City and Ipswich at Highfield Road, a goal in the last minute of the game from Fabian Wilness secured all 3 points for Ipswich. They moved to 5th in the Premiership. I'll be back a little later with the latest on the day's headlines, but now the news where you are.
Now the latest in the southeast, good evening. The New Year's Eve party Londoners had been waiting for was called off today. Mayor Livingston and Bob Geldof are blaming lawyers and safety experts for the cancellation. They said that without the so-called midnight moment, the event wasn't commercially viable.
Turning on the Christmas lights in Regent Street last week was as easy as flicking a switch. Unfortunately, as far as New Year's Eve parties are concerned, the lights have just gone out. Ken Livingston's been forced to call the whole thing off because the event organisers say it's no longer commercially viable.
We put on these events in other cities in the world. I've played at events everywhere in the world, organised them everywhere in the world, and I've never, ever come up against the intransigence.
Imagine, if this mentality had been around during World War II, we would have lost.
Last year, 3 million people descended onto central London for the Millennium fireworks. The police have now admitted they only just about got away with it. But even so, Ken Livingston seems to be putting the blame at the door of the transport chiefs.
What we were looking at was a sort of issue where you have hundreds of thousands of people milling around on a platform, hundreds of thousands of people outside in the street trying to get onto that platform, and people being pushed off the platform, probably in front of an oncoming train.
But members on Ken Livingston's Greater London Authority say the disaster was of his own making. And it may not be over yet. £500,000 worth of fireworks are on their way from India to London at this very moment, and the Millennium Commission says £1.5 million earmarked for the celebrations is still on the table. They're calling for new organisers to come up with revised plans, but time is running out, and organising something at this late stage won't be easy. Joanne Coburn, Newsroom South East, Westminster.
1,800 jobs are under threat at the city's oldest bank. 5 years after Barings was rescued from receivership by the Dutch firm ING, its new owner wants to quit the business. The news has shocked the city. Barings was moving into profit for the first time since the rogue trader Nick Leeson brought it to the edge of bankruptcy.
Barings Bank has been doing business for almost 250 years. In that time, it's come close to disaster more than once. When the firm was brought to its knees in 1995 by the rogue trader Nick Leeson, it looked like the end. But Barings was rescued by the Dutch bank ING. It paid £1 for Barings and said it was a fair price.
Well, these have been a very good few years for investment banking, but there's no guarantee that they'll stay that good over the next 1 to 2 years. So I think, in their minds, this is a good time to sell now and get a reasonable amount of their money back.
A 3-year turnaround plan for ING Barings has been showing good results, but they've come too slowly for ING, and the group is now looking to get out of investment banking.
Weekend press speculation led ING to release this statement from its headquarters in Amsterdam yesterday. It talks about a rapidly changing marketplace, about growing costs in investment banking, and about the fact that the big players are all consolidating. ING has said that it wants to sell its American investment banking operation. It hasn't made it clear what it's going to do about ING Barings here in London. And that means for the 1,800 staff who work in the building behind me, the future is less than certain.
They don't know what's happening. If they knew one way or the other, they could cope with it. But nobody knows what's going to happen here. They decide they'll sell their American operation, but they haven't decided what they're going to do here. But by making the announcement, they've damaged the operation here anyway.
ING has refused to comment any further on the fate of its London workforce. But there'll be some former Barings staff who feel that after the Nick Leeson scandal, they escaped the frying pan, only to land in the fire. Charles Carroll, Newsroom South East, in the city.
The police officers who restrained Roger Sylvester in North London 8 days before he died will not face criminal charges. The Crown Prosecution Service says there's insufficient evidence to bring prosecutions. Mr. Sylvester died in hospital in January last year after being arrested outside his home in Tottenham.
Roger Sylvester's family have staged several protests since his death nearly 2 years ago. At a press conference at the House of Commons today, they criticised the decision not to bring charges.
Not only do I suffer the pain of losing Roger, I am suffering an additional pain of not knowing why he died. Roger, and having to fight the system to know the truth.
Police had found Roger Sylvester naked in the street in Tottenham where he lived, apparently in an agitated state. 8 officers restrained him. At some stage he lost consciousness. He died 8 days later in hospital. Tottenham MP David Lammy has called for an independent judicial inquiry.
Too many young men are meeting their ends in police custody, and a disproportionate number of those are ethnic minority people.
The Crown Prosecution Service had been considering since last October the results of an investigation into the death by Essex Police. The Crown Prosecution Service has explained its decision in unusual detail in a 6-page letter to the family's solicitor. It is possible that they will now seek a judicial review of that decision, but it's more likely that they will wait for an inquest and hope that that will provide the answers to how Roger Sylvester died. Tim Donovan, Newsroom South East, Westminster.
London is still the only place in the country where unlicensed minicabs can ply their trade. Westminster Council is trying shock tactics to make us think twice, highlighting dangers such as faulty brakes and bald tyres that are frequently putting lives at risk on the roads. It's a move backed by licensed drivers.
You only ever use a licensed London taxi, pure and simple. You know, for a lone female to do anything else is frankly ridiculously stupid. You must not use any other form of vehicle other than a licensed taxi.
Well, do you feel that these cars are a danger, or are black cabs so hard to find at night that there's no alternative? Well, you can now log on and join in the debate on our message board at bbc.co.uk/London Live. And that's it from us for the moment. We're back tomorrow morning. Now back to George Alagaya.
The main news tonight: Florida's Supreme Court has the fate of the U.S. presidency in its hands tonight. 7 judges have been hearing arguments about whether the recounting of votes is lawful. And Britain is contributing 12,000 troops, 70 combat aircraft and 18 warships to the European Union's new Rapid Reaction Force. Tonight's Newsnight features a disturbing investigation into child sex abuse within the family through one victim who went undercover to expose her stepfather's depravity.
I was having full sex with Stanley, I think I was about 4.
That's a Newsnight special on child sex abuse starting now on BBC 2. But from the 10 o'clock news, good night.
Hello, good evening. We've had some showers around today, but we're now looking out towards the west at our next area of low pressure. This is heading our way, and it's going to join forces with the low pressure system that we've got already, bringing with it a band of cloud and rain which is expected to push northwards across England and Wales tomorrow. And you can see how tightly packed these isobars are down towards the south. We're expecting severe gales in some places, and towards the English Channel we could see gusts tomorrow night up to around 60 or 70 miles an hour. Now, not only are we watching for this increase in wind, we're also watching for the rain, which we are expecting across England and Wales over the next 36 hours. Now, we could see another inch or so of rain in parts of southwest England adding to the flooding problems we already have. We have several rivers in southwest England on flood watch, and we still have a severe flood warning in force on the River Aire in Yorkshire. Now, if you are at all worried about your area, here's that flood line as always, 0845 988 1188. Now, we still have a few showers around at the moment. They are wintry in places, and these showers down towards the southeast could continue on and off throughout the night. We could also see further showers up towards the northeast of Scotland. But for many of us, it's going to be dry, clear and foggy, and it's also going to turn frosty. Temperatures in many countryside areas will drop below freezing. So driving conditions throughout the night and into tomorrow morning are likely to be quite difficult. We could see visibilities down to around 100 metres in places, and indeed we could well see some icy stretches on untreated roads. So a misty, murky, foggy start to the day tomorrow. That fog only very slowly clearing into low cloud as the morning goes on. Now, we could see a little bit of brightness around across England and Wales before cloud and outbreaks of rain push up from the southwest, perhaps turning to snow over the high ground of northern England. Further towards the north, there'll be a mixture of sunny spells and showers once we get rid of the early morning fog. And it is going to feel raw tomorrow. A top temperature in some areas of just 5 or 6 degrees, but we could see those temperatures peaking at around 9 or 10 late in the day down towards the south. So on Wednesday, it looks like it's going to be windy and unsettled yet again. One area of low pressure moves towards the north on Wednesday, and then another one, it looks like it could push in towards the southeast on Thursday. So a band of heavy rain is expected to push north and east on Wednesday. It'll dry out on Wednesday night, so some frost and fog again, and then there's a possibility of some more wet weather for southeastern areas later on. That's the forecast.
It looks like paradise.
Hundreds of species of both animals and plants have disappeared since humanity first came to Hawaii.
But is this the reality?
What most tourists don't realise is almost everything they see there is introduced.
David Attenborough investigates the tragedy of mass extinction.
It can be seen as an example of what mankind has done to the planet as a whole. It is tragically impoverished.
State of the Planet continues Wednesday at 9:10 on BBC One.
There she was, the loveliest thing I'd ever seen in my life. And I made up my mind there and then that I had to have her.
It is an extraordinary man. That's Speedy Gonzales.
Whether she was free or not.
This really is a good idea, Sheila.
With or without her consent.
You came to see me once.
By fair means or foul.
You're a bad man, I think.
But everything changed when I met you.
Kingsley Amos's wickedly wicked tale.
I shan't be able to stop sleeping with anyone much longer.
To take a girl like you.
Remarkable powers of recovery, that lad. Quite inspiring.
New drama. Starts Sunday at 9:05 on BBC One.
Now on BBC One, Omnibus celebrates the 90th birthday of Dame Alicia Markova, Britain's first prima ballerina.
God gave her a miraculous physique. God gave her those ravishingly beautiful feet. What she made of that was something quite exceptional.
You would never believe such feelings would come from this rather quiet, shy person.
She made her whole dance persona fugitive. Grace and lightness.
BBC Radio 3's season on the new China goes online with debate and exclusive reports at bbc.co.uk/Radio 3.
This lump of rock is about to change our view of the prehistoric world. Does it contain the fragments of an enormous meteorite, the bones of the missing link, or the biggest carnivore that ever lived? Discover the world's most extreme dinosaurs and the way they fought in Horizon, Thursday at 9 on BBC Two.
Horizon. Pure science, sheer drama.
I'm on the train. Where will I find you? Weymouth! Far from the madding crowd.
Should see some sunflowers.
Now you mention it. San Gimignano, the Manhattan of Tuscany.
2 blocks down, 4 across. Lovely. Top local fact, the crossword was invented in New York.
Yeah, beach. Lots of seaside stuff. Yeah, got it.
You know, 5 of Cossa's beaches have won blue flags this season. Past a little pub on the left. Yeah, gotcha.
Wicklow, weekend breaks on your doorstep.
One programme goes to the ends of the earth to bring you world-class holiday information. Holiday 2000, tomorrow at 7 on BBC One.
Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd are trading places. Film comedy in a few minutes on BBC One, after a look at the weather.
Hello and welcome to Weatherview. There's been some flooding in New South Wales and Australia recently. The worst floods for 40 years in some areas. It's dried out here. The wettest weather at the moment is further north in Queensland. Here in Maryborough, more than 2 inches of rain fell in just 6 hours. It looks like there will be further...
You can't expect me to survive when I run out to Marks and Sparks when the devil's really got me.
Now a poor man.
We are not shepherding enough people through the valley of the shadow to earn a decent living.
Never a beggar.
There's Funereal and the stationery. Go on.
But now his wife's a thief.
I thought once you'd had a good look at it, it'd just be a question of sending a cheque.
Greed.
Good gin.
The Sins.
You've taken the goodness out of it, and no amount of bonuses can make up for that.
Continues tomorrow at 9:05 on BBC One.
Posh! Posh! It's starting again. Oh, it's making me come over all faint.
Oh, it's probably a thong riding that one. You hitch it down a little bit.
No, they think it's all over. It's starting again. They've moved it to 9:30 on Friday night. It's following us.
Oh, babe, why don't you read Brooklyn a nice bedtime story, and I'll try and work out how to turn the telly off.
All right.
Hello?
Once upon a time.
Oh, give it to me.
The new series of They Think It's All Over starts Friday at 9:30 on BBC One.
Funny Business now on BBC One. Trading Places includes strong language.
Vote for your all-time favourite episode of One Foot in the Grave.
You've got to go a long way to beat 4.5 hours staring up a horse's bottom.
Call 09001 447701 for The Beast in the Cage.
What on earth happened?
It wasn't my fault.
09001 447702 for The Pit and the Pendulum.
Well, I'll tell you exactly what the problem is, Mr. Sturgeon. He's only planted it in the...
09001 447703 for The Trial.
Do you mind if I ask what you're doing here?
09001 447704 for Warm Champagne.
I have just put super glue on that glass.
09001 447705 for Love and Death.
4291.
It's your choice. Lines close at midnight on Sunday and calls cost a maximum of 10p. Then watch One Foot in the Grave, The Viewers Vote, next Monday 9:30 on BBC One.
This is BBC One, now joining BBC News 24.
In what may become a landmark ruling for the future of the internet, a French court has told the American website Yahoo to stop people in France accessing sites selling Nazi memorabilia.